Star City Games Denver 2 weeks ago with Blue White Miracles, and that's typically the deck that he plays in Legacy. And he also has a handful of runner-ups in Legacy tournaments as well. So this is a name that you guys are probably getting pretty familiar with. And he actually made the drive up here from California. So
yeah, he's a Southern California guy. Also, I found out that his name, we found out earlier today that his last name is actually pronounced Lossett and not Lossett. So apologize to Joe and his family for mispronouncing his name for the better part of 8 years now.
And so, as you see, we have a Diagraph Ghoul from Jacob. Joe has just played his first 2 initial lands, passing the turn back. Nothing too exciting coming so far from Joe, but in this matchup, Zombies versus Neopod, it's really, on the Zombies player to kind of get the aggression going as fast as they can before the Blade Splicers start happening and the Hunt Master of the Fells and all that other stuff. So.
Yeah, it's very hard. The Zombie deck is, the quality of creatures is so much lower than the Pod deck that once the Pod deck gets that engine going, there's not a ton that the Zombie deck can do. Buck also has his own Birthing Pod package in his deck as well. So he's playing sort of the more mid-rangey, attrition-y version of the deck, as opposed to the straight aggressive red-black beatdown deck that we saw take home the trophy in last week's SCG Open.
Sure. As Jacob just gets in for 2, there's some Blood Artists, there's some Fume Spitters. Obviously, the interaction on the table of if he sacrifices Fume Spitter to kill some sort of mana dork or 1 toughness creature, Blood Artist is going to trigger 2 times. Joe is doing next to nothing thus far. One of the things about this Neopod deck, and he actually is 4-color, he has some blue in his deck as well, the mana can be an issue. Like right now, yes. Joe could be holding, and I think it was pretty obvious that he was holding Restoration Angel here, but Joe could be holding, Phantasmal Images, Zealous Conscripts, Hunt Master of the Fells, something of that nature, and he hasn't done anything in his first couple of turns. Thankfully for him, he does have a Restoration Angel here to kind of make combat a little bit more interesting, but those Blood Artists are definitely going to have an impact on the game.
Yeah. So it looks like we're going to be Fume Spittering / Tragic Slipping the Restoration Angel. So we're going to see 4 Blood Artist triggers here from the Fume Spitter and the Restoration Angel, and the Diagraph Ghoul is going to come through uncontested. So it should be 6 total damage for Lossett here.
And that should be knocking him down to 10, and we'll see if Jacob does have a follow-up here.
It doesn't look like it. He's missing red mana. So now we'll see if he has Lossett has Thragtusk here. Would be a huge play.
Which he does have 2 of in his main deck. It would go a long ways towards. I mean, he's not under the most amount of pressure right now.
Yep.
Just because there is just a Diagraph Ghoul, but even though Blood Artist has 0 power, it does represent a lot more pressure than it actually looks like it does.
And if you've tuned into any of the other shows where I've done commentary, what you're seeing right now is also a very common flaw or problem that Black-Red Zombies has. It's the deck that I play the most of in Standard, so I'm quite familiar with this, is the mana base is just a little bit rough. It's hard to find your second color, and right now, Buck is without red mana, so he could be sitting on Brimstone Volley, his 1 copy of Bonfire of the Damned, or his Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, all of which are uncastable currently.
And we see a Phantasmal Image come into play. My guess is that it copied a Blood Artist. If we can get confirmation, yeah, it did copy a Blood Artist. So it's basically going to negate one of the Blood Artists that's on the table. So now he's only going to have to deal with, theoretically, he only has to deal with the one that's on the table.
Yes.
It's not really going to be able to kill it, but instead of, taking 2 from each creature that dies, it's only going to be taking 1 now. One's going to cancel the other one out. So, conceivably, if Diagraph Ghoul comes in, there's probably going to be a trade with the Borderland Ranger. But we'll see what Jacob has here. He's tapping 3. Could be the Mighty Messenger.
Could be a pod. Let's see here. All right, there's a Birthing Pod.
Okay. He's going to take 2 to cast that. Looks like it's going to drop him down to 22.
And is he going to... Nope, and then no attacks. So I think he's, at this point, happy to try to set up the pod engine and win that way. Although it looks like Lossett just drew a pod of his own.
Yes. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the pods are much more powerful in Joe's deck than in Jacob's.
Oh yeah, no question. Buck has not a ton in terms of like a package or some weird engine you can kind of set up. It's basically just there for value and a little bit of utility. Lossett's deck is an entirely different animal. He can start, getting into Hunt Master / Thragtusk / Inferno Titan, that kind of into, Elish Norn. I mean, his suite goes all the way up and is substantially more powerful.
Yes.
So it looks like we're going to be, I assume we're potting into...
We can look, I mean, his options at 4, he has 2 Restoration Angels left in his deck. He has a Solemn Simulacrum. He actually has a Stone Door Dignitary as well. I talked to him about that before the tournament.
Yeah, and there's a Dignitary.
One of the reasons that he's opted to go with Stonehorn Dignitary over Huntmaster of the Fells, which is something you would commonly find in 4-color pod, is because basically his thoughts are he just wants to delay the game until he can pod up to 5, 6, and 7. So between, you know, having a Stonehorn in play, copying with Phantasmal Image or Phyrexian Metamorph, blinking it with Restoration Angel, it's going to buy him enough time to move up his pod chain so that when he does deliver the final blow with Elesh Norn, he's going to be at a comfortable life total.
Yep.
And one of the nice things that Joe did, you know, copying the Blood Artist as well is, you know, if he didn't have a copy of that in play, every time he activates pod, he's going to take 2 damage. This way, he's only going to take 1. It's only going to chip away at him a little bit, where it could be much worse if he did not have that Phantasmal Image on Blood Artist.
So if I'm looking at Buck's hand correctly, it looks like he just drew a Dragon Skull Summit. So this is possibly turning on some portion of his hand. So
looks like we're getting the life totals figured out just a little bit here with the Blood Artist, because it is a little, you know, a little confusing at times when there's, you know, 3 in play, 1 on each side.
So there's a tragic slip here. So that's a that's pretty big here, because Buck's, you know, he's got to close out the game fairly quickly here.
I agree.
So,
I agree. He's going to sack this, and you know, now what's going to start happening is that every time he activates, his Birthing Pod activations are essentially free now.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he's sacking Blood Artist, he's taking 2 but gaining 2, and then he's dealing Joe 2. So now he's going to start basically fireballing him with the Birthing Pod. It's kind of an interesting way around the Stonehorn Dignitary lock that Joe, the kind of soft lock that Joe is trying to establish.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Blood Artist in the sort of traditional red-black zombie package, but certainly when you have Birthing Pod in the deck, I think the card becomes an entirely different animal. Yeah, and we're seeing that right now.
It gives him an alternate route to victory. You know, like the Stonehorn Dignitary is not a very common card in Standard, but you know, in this situation, a normal zombies deck would probably be having a lot of trouble with this right now. Whereas Jacob can, you know, sacrifice his Blood Artist next turn, ding him for 3, go find a messenger, sack the messenger, ding him for a ton, and then, you know, the game is going to be essentially over.
So how does Lossett even proceed from here? I mean, he can get Thragtusk, but that doesn't get him very far, right? He still just dies next turn to Artist spinning up a messenger. Yeah,
I mean, getting Thragtusk now is going to basically just gain him 2 life, because Blood Artists are going to ding him for 3. So, I mean, it'll put him up to 8, but I mean, that's not ideal. Elesh Norn is, I mean, something he can look towards, but again, Elesh Norn isn't something that's theoretically going to save him. All it's going to do is actually fireball himself. The same with an Inferno Titan trying to kill all 3 Blood Artists. It's just going to fireball himself. So, I mean, he definitely needs to get these Blood Artists off the board, as the attack of the Stonehorn Dignitary actually did eliminate one.
Yeah, I think he just chumped that 1 attack.
We're going to see an activation here. He's going to go down to 1 and presumably get a Thragtusk to go back to 6.
Well, doesn't this... Okay, so he's going to 1 and then 6, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think the motivation was there for Buck to chump block?
I'm not entirely sure. To be honest with you, if I'm in Jacob's position there, I'm happy to take the 1, go down to 20 something, you know, 20, be it 28, 20, 26, whatever it's going to be. I'm happy to take the point of damage at that point. So I'm a little bit surprised that he did block there. It seemed like Blood Artist is his best way to victory, and having 3 on the table was going to be very good. Now, I mean, he can sacrifice one of these Blood Artists, as you see a Dragon Skull Summit, to go get a messenger, and then that's going to be 4 points of damage.
Oh, I think this is going to Aristocrat.
Okay. And then it looks, I believe this is going to finish. This is going to finish.
Yeah, he's able to sack a Blood Artist, and that trigger is lethal. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So, going to our sideboard here, we have 2 copies. Buck has access to 2 copies of Torpor Orb. Very good against all the comes into play triggers, obviously, of a Birthing Pod deck. Some copies of Despise, which are also reasonable, and Guess Verdict and Active Aggression, neither of which I particularly like, but I could see possibly wanting some extra spot removal, or a way to punk out someone who's gotten, you know, an Inferno Titan or a Elesh Norn, or fairly juicy active aggression targets. So
sure, that definitely makes sense. Looking at Joe's deck list, an additional Thragtusk is certainly going to be coming in. He has a Pillar of Flame in his sideboard that I presume he's going to board in. We also see a Slayer of the Wicked that he's going to board in as well. And then we find 4 Celestial Purges, which are 100% going to come in.
Yeah.
What I have found over how our standard format has evolved is, when we did commentary in Las Vegas and Zombies won there, Zombies won last week. Zombies is not a deck that can really stand up to a ton of hate, but if you ignore the deck and you skimp on purges, skimp on the hate, it's a kind of deck that can kind of overpower people who are playing minimal hate. But with Joe's sideboard, I see 4 purges, I see an additional Drag Tusk to go with the 3 Blade Splicers in his main deck and everything else that he has against this matchup. You see a Pillar of Flame, you see something as hateful as a Slayer of the Wicked. That's the kind of stuff that you need to really dedicate spots to be able to beat Zombies.
And Lossett actually also has a fairly reasonable game 1 in spite of how lopsided that game was. Elvish Visionary, Blade Splicer, Restoration Angel, Thrag Tusk, Dignitary to a lesser degree. All these cards are pretty excellent against Zombies. So his game 1 isn't even that bad, but he's definitely improving his matchup post-board. He has definitely dedicated a lot of slots to try to improve this matchup. Agreed.
And the thing here is you can definitely tell that coming into this tournament, because of Zombie's success, both on this circuit and online, on Magic Online, it's a very popular deck there as well. People have finally basically come to terms with, yes, Zombies isn't the best deck in the format, but if you leave it unchecked, it can win tournaments, as it's proven.
It's also low cost. I mean, I priced out my Zombies list for a friend of mine who wants to play in tournament in Los Angeles next week. And on Star City Games, my deck was something like $120 for the 75 cards or whatever.
Yeah, that's like nothing.
Yeah, so the fact that it's also very affordable means that it's going to be showing up in tournaments probably to a greater extent than its power level would suggest.
Sure.
Because it's an attacking deck, and it's not that hard to put together, and that influences whether or not it's going to be showing up.
I agree. Now, one card that you brought up as these guys are shuffling up for Game 2, in Jacob's sideboard is Geth's Verdict. And I know that we spoke yesterday in the hotel room, I know that you're a pretty big fan of that card right now.
Yeah, I'm going to be playing Zombies in Los Angeles and presumably Atlanta as well, and I have 4 copies of Verdict made. Yeah, I mean, it covers you from a lot of scenarios. It's hard for it to be bad, and there are tons of situations where it's basically the only thing that can get you out of it. If you're facing down, Geist trapped on the play, or Invisible Stalker, if you just want to attack into a Restoration Angel, like a theoretical Restoration Angel, opponent with 4 up, there aren't a ton of removal spells that provide that level of flexibility.
Sure.
Like all the spot removal that can deal with a Restoration Angel doesn't help you against the hexproof guys, and vice versa. So Geth's Verdict is an excellent way of solving all those things, and it's hard for it to be bad is the other thing. Its floor is pretty low. It's just a kill spell plus deal 1. It's kind of hard for it to be like, oh man, I drew all these Geth's Verdicts, that sucks.
Yeah.
It's hard for that to ever happen.
Yeah, it's hard to be upset about that sort of thing. Where if you draw like the wrong mixture of Arc Trail or what have you.
Yeah, I've definitely drawn 2 Dismembers or 2 Arc Trails and been like, this is horrible.
Sure.
I've never really had that reaction with Geth's Verdict.
As we see, both players are going to keep their opening 7. Joe's going to lead off with a Copperline Gorge and pass. So, I mean, the one thing you're going to find in these games that we've watched is that Joe's starts have been pretty poor given what these pod decks try to accomplish.
Yeah.
They normally start off with some sort of mana dork. I mean, he doesn't even have an Elvish Visionary or anything to do on turn 2 either. Acceptable if he's on the play, pretty unacceptable against Zombies if he's on the draw.
Yeah, you had to assume he has Blade Splicer in his hand. It's really the only thing that can justify keeping this 7 without a Visionary or an Accelerant.
Yeah, obviously I'd like to assume that, but last game I kind of assumed the same thing and I was incorrect. So, I mean, I'm hoping that he does have a Blade Splicer this game.
Well, it's
some
possible,
sort of action.
It's possible the 7 that he kept in the dark was okay.
Okay.
You know
sure, not
mean?
knowing the matchup.
Right.
Sure.
But now with the information, yes, I would have to assume his hand has Blade Splicer, which is one of the best cards you can play against Zombies. My batting average of beating a Blade Splicer is not good. It's not very high.
Not too high?
It's not that high.
Rather difficult to beat. And for on Jacob's side, his start isn't exactly anything terrifying. So, even if Joe, in theory, kept it, debatable hand, not the quickest of hands to get off the floor, he's not underneath a lot of pressure here.
Yeah.
Leaves me to believe, as we do see Blade Splicer, the end boss himself resolve, as we'll have a Golem token coming into play momentarily. It leads me to believe if his start is Fume Spitter plus Mortarpod, we're probably going to see a Dross Messenger coming.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's the Fume Spitter Mortarpod is hard to throw away against decks with mana accelerators, even if the rest of the hand isn't particularly good.
We
So
see
let's
the
see.
3.
And there's a
There he
messenger.
is. There he is. You know, on turn 3, he didn't keep the most aggressive hands, and I do agree with you. You know, those 2 cards are going to take care of the mana dorks quite easily. You know, slow the game down so he can get his pod and everything else online. I figured, you know, on turn 3 of this game, we're either going to see a messenger or we're going to see a birthing pod paying 2 life. One of the two,
Yes.
I think, is one of the cards we were going to see last turn, and he does have the messenger.
So it looks like Lossett's hand has both Celestial Purge and a Phantasmal Image. So.
And the Cavern in play is Naming Illusion, so we do see the image there. I don't think we see any blue mana in his hand, but it is something that he can cast. And Naming Illusion with Cavern is a pretty dead giveaway of what's hiding there. As we're going to see it likely copy. I mean, it's either going to copy a Blade Splicer or it can copy Dross Messenger, but it's going to go on the stack.
Yeah, basically, he has to Fume Spitter the Blade Splicer or Mortarpod the Blade Splicer in response, and then he just gets to copy the Messenger anyway, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
He has to kill the Splicer in response because he can't allow the image to actually land with that card in play.
And now we're going to see a Celestial Purge on Dross Messenger, which is, I mean, presuming that it's going to resolve, and I can't imagine why it wouldn't.
Right, yeah.
A pretty big beating on Jacob's side.
So this is an insane turn for Lossett here, obviously.
I mean, he's deciding right now if he wants to get in for 3. I don't really see a reason why he wouldn't. You know, presumably the worst thing that Jacob can do next turn is a land Falkenrath Aristocrat.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that the Golem token's gonna be able to do about that.
Well, it's just it's a larger issue of if Lossett thinks that he has total inevitability from this position and he just has to protect himself from getting punked out, and there's a Despise. So we're looking at Avacyn's Pilgrim, Birthing Pod, and another Cavern. If Lossett is confident that he has inevitability from here, he might just be unwilling to trade 3 for 1, period.
Sure.
It's not just about what could happen, what's the best thing that could happen next turn. It's also an issue of, can I only lose this game if something crazy happens, therefore am I better off just being conservative for the sake of being conservative?
Sure. As we see, Joe draws another land this turn, so he has 2 lands in his hand and he has a Birthing Pod, of course Birthing Pod being the most important card in his hand and in his deck. Phantasmal Image is a copy of a Dross Messenger for those of you who are just tuning in. We're going to see an attack here in for 6 over to Jacob. And now this is where the deck, you know, starts to spiral out of control.
Yes.
Because now we're going to see a Birthing Pod activation, presumably sacrificing Phantasmal Image, which is a copy of Dross Messenger to search it before. You know, the image is going to come back into play as a copy of something with a +1/+1 counter on it. I mean, I don't want to get. I would guess perhaps a Fume Spitter. I could see it being a Blood Artist as well. But either way that he does decide to go, it's a fantastic turn for Joe.
Yeah,
this a ton of value being given.
Yeah, this is a nice interaction of the Phantasmal Image when he copies Messenger. When he comes back to play, he gets to reset.
Yes.
So basically, I believe Buck has to respond to the Birthing Pod with Fume Spittering the image because he can't just let like the copy plus go getting a 3-drop happen. But it's not even that good for him to kill in response because the image still gets to come back and still gets to start spinning the pod. So this is just a really rough spot for Buck, basically.
Agreed.
So he's debating about whether or not he's going to allow the pod to come to play if he's going to use the Fume Spitter here. In response.
For those of you guys wondering, the second Cavern that just came into play is naming Giant for Sun Titan or Inferno Titan in his deck. Now, if you're Jacob on this side, you know, you can Fume Spitter targeting the image.
Yeah, you might as well. Yeah, you kind of have to, right?
Yeah. A Blood Artist trigger is going to happen for 2. 2 Blood Artist triggers, excuse me.
Yes.
It's going to come back into play. It's going to copy Blood Artist, presumably. Yep, it looks as though he's motioning. It's going to copy Blood Artist. And now it's going to be a 2. It's going to be a 2. So now, if he does, do you think he elects the Birthing Pod here? The 2 away to go get a 3?
I think you kind of have to because it's like you just risk your pod chain getting broken up, right? He's out of gas.
Yeah, I mean, all Joe has left in his hand is a land.
Right, so I think you just have to go get like a borderline. Why not just get another Blade Splicer, right?
I believe that's okay. I mean, his life total, he's going to go down to 11 from this. Between the Birthing Pod, the hybrid mana, paying the 2, or excuse me, the Phyrexian mana to pay the 2, plus the Blood Artist trigger, he's going to take 3 damage from this total. And then, yeah, I agree with you. He's going to get a Blade Splicer. He's going to have 2 3/3s in play. The Blade Splicer itself is going to have to get killed now, because if it doesn't, he can go start moving up his chain even further.
Yeah, and the fact that Buck has Mortipod in play means that he has an onboard way of killing the image if you just sit.
Sure.
So he just kind of has to. I understand he would want. Ideally, he would want to sit on his image to basically have a push with the other Blood Artists, like have that copied. But the odds are so high that his image just dies somehow on Buck's turn. I think you just got to cash it in while you can cash it in.
Now the interesting thing in this game is, Joe is, for lack of a better term, he's kind of all in right now. He does have a Birthing Pod on the table that he can keep moving up. But he doesn't have anything in his hand, and Jacob has what looks to be about 4 cards in his hand. We don't have a good look at them, but essentially Jacob is the one that's making the decisions now. Everything that Joe can do is pretty much present.
Yeah.
He can break up the pod chain, hope that he doesn't draw anything. He despised Joe already last turn, so I think he can kind of infer that he doesn't really have a lot of action in his hand. He doesn't know that Copperline Gorge is the last card in his hand.
Yeah.
But just kind of the way that this game is played out a little bit, I think you can kind of infer that he doesn't really have much at this point, and the things that I'm scared of are on the table right now, and if my cards can beat them.
You also just don't have. Okay, it looks like we're. I don't see how you can let him untap if you're gonna move the Mortipod over.
Yeah, I don't think letting him tap is okay. I mean, his thought process is likely I want to block one of the Golem tokens and then shoot the Blade Splicer in combat to get value, but what is likely going to end up happening is he's just going to
pot up something.
He's just going to pot up something like right now.
He's going to attack first because Lossett has Gavney Township, so we can just. So yeah, he's just going to use the Township.
Activate the Township, sure.
I'm not a huge fan of this sequence from Buck.
I mean, he's in a rough spot either way, but I do think that, yes, I think he does have to try to stop the pod chain at pretty much all costs, like you said.
Yeah. Or you're on a plane to just burn him out, and your Mortipod shock should have gone to Lossette's head and not to the Blade Splicer.
Sure. Because
there's some,
I don't think there's any coming back now.
Yeah, there is some logical inconsistency with the sequencing. And now there's not a ton to be done, I think.
And these are the kind of situations that Zombies doesn't ever want to be in. Kind of on the back foot, under a lot of pressure. There's a bunch of giant idiots coming after him.
Yeah.
Zombies, they don't defend themselves very well. A lot of their creatures come into play tapped, or they're just weak creatures.
Yeah. You're not going to go... There's no way you can fight toe-to-toe with Blade Splicers plus Gavney Township.
Yeah,
that's not a fight you can possibly win.
So Joe Lossett takes down game 2. We are going to go to a game 3 for these gentlemen momentarily. I don't think that anything really changes in the sideboard. I have Joe's deck list in front of me. Patrick has Jacob's. Patrick, being a Black-Red Zombie, is kind of sore. I'm a big fan of Birthing Pod, as some of you guys may know. I don't really think that much changes here for Joe. There's nothing in that game that he saw that's really going to change, his plan of attack. He still has, the additional Thragtusk moving him up to 3 after sideboard. You're going to find the Pillar of Flame in the sideboard coming in, Slayer of the Wicked, and 4 Celestial Purges. So he's boarding in 7. It's debatable what he's going to cut. I can't predict the future, but the cards that he's bringing in are quite powerful cards. I don't think anything is going to really force him to change what he's done.
Yeah, and Buck is going back to the sideboard. It's possible he's bringing in Manic Vandals now.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of those kind of reactive cards against Birthing Pod because I feel like the damage has already been done. I also believe that you have to have a huge reason to bring in red cards in sideboarding games in general because you just don't have red mana a lot of the time too. He has Cavern of Souls, which can help a little bit with Manic Vandal, but that introduces other mana issues. But after losing to Pod plus Blade Splicer, I think it's hard to fight that instinct in your head that you need to be bringing in your artifact removal.
Yeah, you see Mana Fan on your board, you think about what you just lost to in that game, which is I lost to an Artifact
A bunch
Golem.
of artifacts.
I lost to an Artifact Golem and Blade Splicer. I'm
Yeah.
going to go reach for Manic Vandals now because I don't want to lose to that again.
Like in my zombie sideboard, for example, I have Gut Shot just because it is castable without red mana.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
And so
I mean, that's just one of the inherent flaws with zombies, as you said, is the mana. Even though you have 8 duels that tap for red, and you do have Jacob's particular list has 3 caverns. There's no guarantee that you're going to draw that mana.
Yes.
There's nothing that says you're going to draw that, or worse yet, is let's say that you're hoping to draw that red mana to be able to get yourself back in the game, and it's a Blackcliff Cleaves as your 4th land. Something like that is very realistic that can happen with this deck.
Oh yeah. It is not just theory crafting. That stuff happens on the regular.
Yeah. I mean, do you think? I personally think that this matchup is pretty favorable for pod decks in general.
Yes.
Pods versus zombies. Just as you said, Blade Splicer is a nightmare. He doesn't have all the nightmare cards that that some people may have. He only has 3 Blade Splicers instead of 4. There's no Huntmaster of the Fells. He only has 3 Restoration Angels instead of 4. He's not fully loaded up on Thragtusk, but 3 is typically enough. But I think overall, just what both decks are trying to accomplish, I think that a pod deck, be it Naya, be it Bant, whatever, is typically favored in these type of matchups.
Yeah, this is definitely the matchup I would want to see the least as a zombies player.
Now, that being said, if you're Jacob, I think you're in the position that you want to be in. You're on the play game 3. You can maybe steal one.
Yep.
As we see a Diregraph Ghoul to start. Both players have looked to keep their opening 7 as well. We'll see if Joe can start with a Mana Dork.
There it is.
There we go.
A bird.
And I would be surprised if it was long for this world.
Diregraph Ghoul in for 2. Oh, just
Oh, no.
passing. Are we splicing?
It could be public enemy number 1.
Lossett, a big fan of the revised lands.
Borderline
Ranger.
Okay.
Also
still
quite good.
Still good.
Quite good.
I mean, getting a land for his deck. I mean, his deck is 4 colors, so the fixing is quite relevant, and it can trade with the Diregraph Ghoul, so still quite good. So we see a Cavern of Souls from Jacob. We'll find out what it's naming momentarily. In for 2.
I assume we're going to be blocking pronto here.
If I'm in Joe's position, I've never blocked faster.
Yeah. This is as good as it gets for a Borderland Ranger. There we go.
And Cavern is going to name zombies, so we're going to see the big man.
And there's a messenger.
It's going to drop Joe down to 16. So see, Joe draws a Bird of Paradise for the turn. Of course, the most important thing that now for Joe is, you just want to get that messenger handled and taken care of. You don't want it to get out of control, hopefully not even attacking you. If he has a Celestial Purge, and I see some white cards kind of hiding around in his hand, and I see at least 1 Purge.
Yep.
As Elvish Visionary resolves and draws him a Razor Verge Thicket. I mean,
Elvish Visionary also just, in a pretty subtle way, but is also awesome against zombies.
Absolutely.
They have a bunch of, one-toughness creatures, and beyond that, just generally clogging up the ground and giving yourself a little bit of breathing room to get to your end game is all you're really in the market for.
So as we see Celestial Purge again on Draw-Off's Messenger, and we see another Purge in his hand as well. So, if you're wondering if
and there's
it's
Cliffs
right,
there's Cliffs as land number 4
Yeah.
as predicted.
There's Cliffs as land number 4. If you're Joe, you have the other Purge in your hand. So burning the first Purge in the Messenger is perfectly reasonable because now you have outs.
He just threw a third Purge.
He just threw a third Purge, so now he's perfectly fine against Aristocrat and Messenger. So
Yeah.
he's doing great.
Although he's still, it looks like he's kind of flooding out a little bit. Like I think his hand is just the 2 purchase plus lands in a bird or something like that. He still needs to find something to, actually close the game off fairly quickly with, because he can't spin his wheels forever.
For sure. I definitely agree with that. And we're probably going to see another Bird of Paradise come into play here.
I think that he's willing to just not cast the bird this turn to hold up mana to purge. Which actually means I think he should have tapped the bird, because if he goes Tragic Slip your bird, now play Aristocrat, now that mana gets burned.
He can just float the mana with the bird.
But then he just passes and maybe plays it after combat or whatever.
Sure.
It's just I would rather tap the bird, because that's a mana source that could potentially not be there this turn when you need it.
Sure. As you see, the third purchase is going to be used on the Blood Artist. I believe Jacob just has 1 card left in his hand, bouncing it up and down furiously in his hand. We saw that Joe did just draw a Gavany Township, So even though he is flooding, we're going to have a sink for some of that
Yeah,
mana
that's
now.
a great draw. Well, I'm not surprised he didn't town like.
Oh, well, he's got
Oh,
something
he's got
else.
some. Oh, he has.
Oh,
a
the
pun.
best card in his deck.
Never mind.
Okay. And it's your favorite creatures time. Here he comes.
Oh no!
Golem token in tow.
Oh no!
This is going to be a difficult game for Jacob to win.
I mean, he basically needs Aristocrat now to have any sort of game, and even then, we can just get Dignitary next turn.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get to the point where he can really start moving up the chain. And even if, you know, let's say that he did board in Manic Vandal, he does draw Manic Vandal to blow up the Birthing Pod. He still has to deal with the Golem, the Blade Splicer, but most importantly of all of those things, he has to deal with the Gavney Township that's on the table.
So, yeah, this is what I was talking about in terms of like the damage is already done.
Sure.
It's, you know, even if he had Manic Vandal right here, it'd be like, all right, it's okay, I guess, but it's not even that good.
Sure.
So,
zombies, he's going to get his messenger.
Yeah.
And then he's just going to get
so
his...
he was just trying to bluff Lossett there with a free roll attack, but Lossett wasn't having any of it. He just put his Golem in front.
First strike is a powerful weapon.
Yeah, it sort of minimizes your risk for anything bad happening.
Sure.
I don't know what he could have to make this block bad, but I want to see what it is.
Let's find out.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
So I assume now we're just going to be in the position of just spinning Pod plus Gavney Township and grinding the game down like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what he's going to do. You know, he can get to the point where now Joe has all the options at his disposal. He can, you know, attack however he wants to. He can sacrifice Birthing Pod. He can sacrifice Birds to Birthing Pod to get an image to copy Blade Splicer. He can move up the chain, sacrifice the Blade Splicer to get a 4 of some nature. You know, he has all the options at his disposal now.
Yep.
He has the mana to do everything that he wants. He has plenty of life to do whatever he wants, and he's not under pressure that he can't handle.
It is worth noting that Buck has a singleton Bonfire the Dam and a singleton Killing Wave, so he has some weird outs to what's going on here.
Sure, outs are definitely minimal, but he's not drawing dead.
Yes. But he's got to find him pretty quick.
I'm going to see Joe sacrifice the Soul Blade Splicer. 4 is up the chain. He has 3 Restoration Angels, 1 Solemn Simulacrum, 1 Stonehorn Dignitary, 1 Phyrexian Metamorph. And the Slayer of the Wicked. That's like the full rubbers. That's like the salt in the eyes, right? And we got a reader.
Yeah.
We got a reader. That's the salt in the eyes.
Yeah. I came ready for this matchup, my friend.
Yeah. I don't want to lose to you, ever.
So, what do you think of the lack of... I know you have a lot of Birthing Pod experience. It seems like Lossett does not have a Deceiver Exarch in his list, which I believe is fairly commonplace in the blue pod lists. How do you feel about the exclusion of that card?
That's one of the more contested slots in the deck overall. Some people, like myself, I swear by it after playing with it a lot. Some people don't really like it. It's a little cute. You know, you're not really living in reality when you're talking about moving up the chain with Deceiver Exarch and Restoration Angel and all that jazz. You know, my thoughts on it, as we're going to see Jacob casting Phyrexian Metamorph, paying 2. Let's see what it copies here before I finish my anecdote.
It looks like he's copying
Birthing Pod.
Yeah.
He's going to have to tap that Phyrexian Metamorph. It's not free. You just can't pod as much as you want one turn.
I don't know exactly what Buck's looking for here. He's looking a little frustrated, but it's like, hey man, your deck's got a bunch of crappy zombies in it. You just sacrificed a 1 caster, so we thought that, you know, you get some awesome thing.
It's the old Butcher Ghouls here.
Yep.
I mean, he's going to put Butcher Ghoul into play, and presumably he's going to use that Cavern to get back his Gravecrawler. And then, you know, hopefully this will buy him some amount of time, but...
Well, I think he's actually facing down lethal this coming turn, because Lossett gets a Township at the end of the turn, and then he has Township threatening on the attack, so...
As we do see a Township activation here at the end of the turn, Joe's going to go to his turn and draw a card. But very quickly to finish that anecdote up, I mean, the people who consider it to be kind of a cute interaction with Deceiver Exarch, my thoughts on it are basically, it's something you know, it is a very cute interaction, and maybe it's not realistic, but it gives you options. And in a pod deck, something that you really want is options. You have the option to do that, but it's not necessarily your game plan to do XR, copy it, blink it, blah, 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 blah. But if it does come up, and you have the opportunity and the life to do it, it's something that no other deck can do.
Yeah. There's also, like, plenty of matchups where just actually drawing a random Deceiver Exarch is not that bad. Like, I certainly do not, as a Zombies player, I certainly don't want my opponent to have a random Deceiver Exarch in their hand. It's going to muck up combat. One of my guys is probably going to get eaten in combat or whatever.
Yeah, and it's not something that anyone ever plays around either.
Yes.
You know, like it's just like, oh, if you have your Exarch, you have it, whatever. Well, I have it, and it's good. Joe, we know that he's sandbagging that Bird of Paradise in his hand. And it's probably just going to be. I mean, I presume this turn's just going to be an attack plus a township activation.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised he didn't play his Bird of Paradise pre-combat because it would be.
Well, he may want to have the option of potting without paying life and using township inside of combat.
Okay. That makes sense to me then. This Butcher Ghoul is going to get himself a little counter. We're going to see it attack for 3, 4, 5. That's going to be a 7 damage, putting Jacob, I believe, down to 3 if we have the totals correct.
Yeah, down to 3. Like, maybe he wants to spin his bird into a Visionary right now? I don't know.
He can spin his bird into a Visionary. He can spin his Slayer into a Thragtusk.
Yeah.
And, you know, Thragtusk is going to put Joe up to 19, and then there's realistically no way that he can lose.
All right, so it looks like it's going to be the...
He could be spinning into a Visionary or an Image, copying Slayer, Slayer killing Butcher Ghoul to slow down the pod chain. So
also totally fine. Any number of awesome turns afforded to him.
You know, this is what it makes these Birthing Pod decks so good. You know, if you are able to gum up the game enough, gum up the ground, keep yourself at a relatively high life total, the world is your oyster.
Yeah, there's almost no deck that can fight you once you actually have your shop set up.
Yes.
You know, if you have pod plus some dudes plus reasonably high life total, no one can fight you.
Yes.
I mean, the outcome's basically inevitable.
My thoughts of one of the things that I always tell people about pod if they're considering playing it is, the way that I look at it is this: if you activate Birthing Pod twice in a game, you've probably won.
Yep.
And I think that we have seen at least two activations, potentially 3 from Joe. And I can't see a way. Anything's possible because it is a game of Magic, but I can't see a way that he would lose this game. And we have not seen the Miracle Bonfire yet either.
Right.
So.
It would have to be like Killing Wave sort of shenanigans, right? Like, or the Bonfire, something along those lines. But yeah, even then, Lossett can just spin his bird into a Visionary and like start over again. It's not even like
he's not even a terrible situation. Yeah. We don't know what Jacob's mystery card here is, unfortunately, but he is tanking away about his options. I think he's come to the same conclusion that we are, that none of them are too spectacular.
So he's going to go to 1 here and turn his Gravecrawler into a, not sure what, a Blood Artist. Okay.
Can't get the Gravecrawler back from what we can tell at this point.
Yeah.
He does have Killing Wave in his hand as his last card. So
okay, so
he's going to try to set up some sort of Killing Wave here, get some life back with the Blood Artist.
It's not horrible.
He's giving himself the best chance. He's giving himself the best opportunity to win, which is all you can ask for. We're going to see what looks to be a Killing Wave here for 4. And Killing Wave, for those of you guys who are wondering, have our director bring it up on the screen, because it is kind of an intricate card, as Joe is actually reading it right now. It's seldomly played. It's a one-of in a zombie deck, and that's pretty much it. It's X and a black, and the X is the opponent can pay X amount of life for each creature, or let it die.
Yep.
And when Blood Artist is in play, it's kind of
it's a combo.
Yes, damned if you do, damned if you don't, sort of thing. But Joe's life total is high enough that, he just needs to basically do the math right now, see what he can let die, what he can let live, and just don't get yourself killed.
Yeah, he basically needs to keep 2 guys to lethal him on the way back.
And there it is on the screen for you guys. For each creature, its controller sacrifices unless he or she pays X life. So what's gonna and X is 4 here. So there's gonna be 3 Blood Artist triggers. He's going to go up to 6. Joe's going to go down to 11. And then Joe kept a guy, so he's going to go down to 7. So it should be if I have my math correct, ending life totals of this killing wave should be Jacob 6, Joe down to 7, and then he has he has the 5/4 Slayer. Township is going to make it a 6/5, and that's going to be exactly lethal.
Right.
So as long as he didn't screw up the math there, he's going to be okay, and he got it figured out, and so he takes the game down. So Joe's set
2-1.
2-1 over Jacob Buck with his Nyapod kind of 4-color pod brew.
Yep. Blade Splicer strongly correlated to victory against the